introduce and share my screen? Or not even yet?
Hey everyone, how's it going? My name is Diego. I am with a support team here at Design Lab, and we are with Joseph Alfonso, who's going to teach us today how to run a remote usability test. I'm sorry. Um, so please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. You can let us know where you're from. You don't have to. You're more than welcome to if you'd like. Please add all your questions to the questions tab. We will get to those after Joseph is done. And what else? What else? Again, my name is Diego. I am with the support team at Design Lab. Thank you again for joining us. Introduce yourself in the chat and questions in the questions tab, and we will get to all of your questions at the end. And I will put myself away and leave it to Joseph.
Thank you, Diego. A little bit about myself. I'm with Design Lab. I've been doing Design Lab for about 6 years now, all through from Design 101 to career counseling, even the academy programs. I also mentor and teach in downtown Seattle at SVC's School of Visual Concepts. And currently, I'm the principal designer, user experience designer at Discovery Education. So I kind of oversee, I do remote usability testing and evaluative research. I own like one or two projects. I also manage 2 or 3 small teams of people while also collaboratively promoting, better user experience culture. I'm going to start sharing my screen here in a moment and just go through usability testing in general, but with a focus on remote usability testing and low cost and affordable, like accessible usability testing. So it's hopefully something that everyone here can apply, take, and at least some type of, I'll go through some tools, and we'll take this little journey together. I'll start sharing my screen here in a moment. Okay. So the general format, 30 minutes of presentation, 30 minutes of QA time, just about. So I'm going to go over just define the scope of this presentation. So what is research, user research, usability testing, and remote usability testing? There's differences here, right? So what is research? Research is basically systematic inquiry. You want to know more about a particular topic. You go through a kind of a formula to your process, and then you kind of identify who your population is, what you would like to know, and then define your methods for that. So what is user research? And I use Erica Hall's quote here. She's a little bit more experienced with this. And it's when we talk about user research as distinguished from usability testing, we're talking about ethnography, the study of humans and their culture context, and culture and social context. We want to learn about our users as target audiences and their habitual environments. So there's a difference there, right? User research and then so we'll go through some of what user research is, some examples. This is something that one of my team members did, Jessica, journey analysis. User research is kind of, we want to understand our users, so we can't talk to everybody. So we're going to gather a representative population. I work with Discovery Education, an e-learning company. So we have 3 different types of personas in this instance, where we were going for educators, students, and then we have vendors as well. What do they do? What metrics support their success to their goals? What impede them? And what have they been saying? Now, none of this is all based on data, but it's partially subjective, mostly objective. You want to make sure everything's based on data and you're not just making up stories about people. User research is also personas, and this is a great opportunity kind of to educate the team. User research is, you'll see on the side here, I've got similar tools used Padlet. So that's one of our competitors, right? We might have some team members who don't know that. So it's a great way to just get some language and vocabulary established. Gamify it here, get little ratings. These really don't matter. We want to get a model out of this. We want to know who the user is. All right. Oh, I see we have a Discovery Ed user. Oh, that's great. That's nice. That's actually pretty cool. We have a few up here in Washington as well. User research too is going into, it's time intensive, and like this is what you'll see here is an affinity chart. So I've got a list of people on the left. We've got a list of tasks on the top. Oh, is my audio not as smooth right now? Okay, just let me know if I need to fix it. we usually have goals. When you go into a study, you have like 4 or 5 different goals, and you want to group these goals. So we have 4 or 5 tasks that go into a specific goal, another one, and we just kind of group common patterns from left to right. Down here, it's really spreadsheet heavy sometimes. Then we have to make them actionable. How do we? I've even talked to some people here at Facebook. Spreadsheets. Usually, Airtable is a common one too. Spreadsheets are just super heavy and just extremely useful. Now, what is usability testing, right? So I took usability.gov, their definition for this one, which is evaluating a product or service and making sure you're testing it with representative users. You really want to understand how you're performing. It's part of the evaluative user research part of it. So usability testing is part of the Venn diagram of user research. There is an explicit split there, and I will go into a bit about that a little later on here. Some usability testing, a little bit more quantitative. We've got success, time on task, which targets did they choose, was it a secondary success, and we also have qualitative stuff. I'll generally run my sessions where if I'm running it, I have at least one note taker. We'll usually have 2 or 3 people. It's ideal to have maybe 2 other people, but when I do my session, I'll go back and record it and we'll compare our findings. So we have 2 sets. You can see here, it's when you're doing remote usability testing, it's common if you can't get the user to share their screen or you're on a device and you can't get them to install something, have them sit in front. It's kind of a trick I've seen, where we just have them put the webcam on the screen. We don't need to see their face necessarily. Usability testing will also give you metrics such as like flows, heat maps. How are we performing? Are people completing these tasks? You want to create kind of a benchmark. So when you test, you kind of retest and compare on and on as you keep doing that. The types of user testing now. There's remote usability testing. There's moderated, and then there's unmoderated. Moderated, it's one-on-one. You are interacting with the participant while they complete their tasks. It's essentially a regular user interview or user test just done explicitly in different locations. Now, unmoderated is completely independent. The user can do it at whichever time they want. It's usually tool dependent upon that a lot. There's a lot of tools now that are starting to come out that enable this a bit more though. But it's also better for quantitative stuff. And what I just showed, if I went back, it's like you can't get a lot of the whys, otherwise you're turning it into a survey, which is fine. And we'll get into mixed kind of studies here, but it's quite a bit more challenging to moderate. Also, task handoff, when you have to have a user with a task, please put something in your cart, please add something. Are feature flags on okay, I guess we'll save the questions for the end, but I can definitely answer that one. Unmoderated, I've noticed without introducing a bias, you don't really want to tell the user you have, yes, correct. Okay, yes, that's good, right? You just want them to complete the tasks. That means, one, the task needs to be explicit enough that they know there's an end condition, or if they could forfeit it too. And that's the thing too, you don't want to write, okay, you succeeded. So that I've had lots of issues with transitions on screens. Now, the types of research, okay. Now, this could be broken down. There's tons. There's like, are we doing attitudinal? Are we doing this? I generally break my research down. I'm trying to look for my notes here, into stages. There's discovery, there's the exploration stage, there's the testing, and then there's the listening stage. Now, I'll go through some of these, and I highlight this one because evaluative is what usability falls within. Organizational research is kind of figuring out how your organization works, who's the stakeholders, what do I have to do to kind of get things done throughout the organization, understand that. It's commonly done high level or early on. Competitive analysis. Now, if you go and do research on the web, you'll see competitive analysis many times are looking very holistically at brands and what's our core competency, what do we do better than them, what do we do? In my experience with usability and in this evaluative type context, we're generally looking at features. If I have to go for a share feature, I'm going to go to a few, I'm not going to go to necessarily competitors. I will check them, but I'm going to go to services that offer the same functionality, but perhaps for different use cases. I want use cases and features, not necessarily just overall holistic brand experiences. User and customer research, we kind of went over that a little bit earlier. It's just getting to know your user. It's a very umbrella term here. I also say that these are all, again, from my experience and my perspectives, taken from like usability and lots of scholarly articles. So there's going to be a little bit of leeway left and right on these. Generative research, that's kind of where what is the problem? What are we looking for? Well, what do we want to, what's going to make this product better? What's going to enable success for our users? Or what are some impediments that are not enabling or in the way of the users? Descriptive and explanatory, you want to then when, why is this happening? What should we be figuring out? Let's like narrow this down a little bit, start your creative brief, and then the causal and evaluative, which is what we're focusing on today. And you'll see at the bottom, this is just a small sample, and 80% of your stuff is coming from like usability testing. You'll probably do card sorting or tree testing, which is like reverse card sorting. It's for navigation. Does your navigation make sense? Is that effective? Are items where users would expect them? Split, multivariant, and A/B testing. Everybody has heard of A/B testing, right? Yes. Well, A/B testing requires extremely dense amount, high amounts of users, and you have to manage two different websites. I said two different experiences, right? So I put these three in here because multivariant is similar to A/B testing, just that you're changing one or two different things. And split testing, in my opinion, is when you're just comparing two designs, whether you're preference testing them. It's a smaller scale of those two. I bet there's a lot of people that would challenge me on that, but if you read it and kind of A/B testing is used. You'll hear the term a lot, but I don't know if it'll be used correctly a lot. It'll just elicit the idea that we need to do some comparative and kind of compare two experiences or multiple experiences. 5-second test and first click test. I mean, I put these in here because I like to focus on getting layers of information, low cost type stuff that, if we're taking concessions on maybe the quality because remote usability might not be in person, then let's get as many layers as possible. So what are the initial impressions of the user? What are the first things they want to click? It's just a different layer. It's patterns. Next time we come test, are they clicking something different? Okay, what changed? What happened? So it's a really good way to evaluate qualitative changes. You'll get challenges on all of these, but if you make a good report and you have everything that supports each other, it's going to make for much more competent design decisions, and you'll end up winning support much more effectively through these. Or you'll make someone mad, and they'll go check your report, and you'll find out the right way, because the best way to get someone to read your research is to make someone mad. Why would we do remote usability testing, right? Well, for many reasons. One, I'm a remote worker, so I can't be flying out, right? The budget's just not there. So it's massively less expensive. A lot of these will be partially repeated, but it's the same time is short. I mean, I could technically go grab some recruits right now. Granted, I have to get their paperwork done and everything, but if you can contact somebody, you can test. Your audience isn't centralized. I have to deal with users in the UK, in Egypt, in Chile, and sometimes we have users in, I think, Vietnam as well. So I don't have an opportunity like to do time zone switching and stuff. I can't get those people in an office. That's bananas. So it's the best way to contact people is just through the internet. That's why it's there. Again, similar to that, physical accommodations aren't available. There could be some type of, and I lead into it here with accessibility issues, any physical problems or just limitations of, people are busy, might have kids or something. It might be the only option. You just don't, it's an immature team. That's okay. It's an opportunity. So you just haven't done it before. It's common metric. So why would we run these tests? Well, what do we want to find out, right? We want to find out our task completion rate, and that's big. So that's task completion. That's also like binary. Did they complete? Did they not complete? Did they complete with difficulty? What was the challenge? Was it a critical challenge? Is it fixable? Time on task, time on the page as well, not just the task. Sometimes there's multiple interactions on the page. It's a single page experience. So we want to make sure we're not just tracking from URL to URL, but from action to action. And that also goes with clickstream paths. It's just kind of where is the user going? And I'll give you a great tool for that later that enables just prototypes to be analyzed in that fashion. Satisfaction or opinion ratings. Oh, these are hit or miss. Sometimes you want to ask the user after the task what they thought about it. Now, user research 101, never listen to the user. They are tell you what you want to hear. You have to really interpret it, right? So satisfaction, opinion ratings, kind of subjective ratings that you make up. They're good. Again, if I go back to my original principle for some more information, that's what you want. but you're probably going to want to ask those repeatedly because subjective answers are models. They're not really, you have 3 tests, you're going to get 3 different ranges. You just want to make sure that the target is within there or if there's any anomalies. Web analytics data, so you can get browsing, operating systems, screen resolutions, and that way also if you have a problem, you can identify and hopefully fix, okay, well, I know with certain things, I've been with some Figma prototypes, we've had scaling issues and we have to tell them to go to the top right, and there's just little wonkinesses in that manner in regard. Additional metrics, which are a little bit more qualitative. So after we've gone through all these, we kind of do, okay, and this is where you're like heuristic analysis. There's all these kind of names for formal reviews. These are just used loosely. Afterwards, let's kind of go through the problems identified through that affinity matrix, right? We're going to go through some high-level problems. And this task, was there learnability? It might not apply, right? But it might. Efficiency, excuse me, I've actually got these written down for, okay, there we go. I lost my place on that one, but efficiency is how fast can the user complete it. Memorability is after a period of time, if you bring back a user, do they remember it? If you have a persona where your user goes away for 2 or 3 months and they comes back, kind of how fast can they pick up on these patterns? They could be proprietary patterns to you and your brand, and maybe they like don't follow exactly the affordances of other ones, but it has to make sense in your design system, and that's where a kind of a design system come in. The errors, that's like task completion rate. It's just that you can break down errors 3, 4 different levels. How severe are they? Are they usability errors? Was this an expectation on the user? Is this something we need to act upon? If you get enough of that error, then it becomes an issue. If one user has that error, maybe not. If I go back a few slides, you have like standard deviations for users and tasks. So we use that to identify if it's a bad task or if the users generally maybe has a low literacy in technology. And then there's that satisfaction ranking again at the end. This is a dense slide, I apologize, but I do believe it's good to have a list of advantages and disadvantages kind of explicitly right next to each other. And I'm going to go through a bunch of these, and I've got 2 little notes down here that if you read, I want to recognize that you're probably going to read something a little bit different, so I want to just show you how I came to that conclusion. It eliminates the need for the lab environment. The Hawthorne effect, it's basically just the user knows you're looking at them, so they're going to perform better. They're going to try to complete the task to succeed. There's stories about it online where you can read where there's an assembly line and they turn the lights down or up and they perform better. It's really because they're being watched and monitored. Run more tests simultaneously. This kind of goes down to the low level of effort on it. I can have 2, 3 people out running the same tests. Don't need office spaces or anything. All I need is another Ring Central Zoom room. I already went through the list. Diverse participants. I forgot tests in there twice. You can extend your test day. This is really lovely. I work with teachers and I get to extend them like in the afternoons or at night. And if they have dinner, if they're on their way home, it's a great way to really develop relationships too. Now you might lose some contextual inquiry here, like there may not be in their natural setting, but you're getting the person in a comfortable environment. And what you want to do is know your user. You want them to speak. You want them to tell you what they're doing. You want them to kind of have a stream of consciousness. So, almost 0 startup time. I think logistically much simpler is probably repeated like 3 times in there. And flexibility in people not making it in time. I've had people get stuck in traffic. It's like, it's okay. I'm at my house. Don't worry about it. Give me a call back soon. And I've had, it's made so many relationships with users better by doing that and providing that type of like flexibility and intention. Disadvantages though, it's not always great. Lots of security issues. I work with education and learning. I have to go through a HIPAA compliance, similar HIPAA compliance where I've, no children, first off, for me, at least for us, we have to, that's something specific, but we still have to go through, they have to sign paperwork, they have to know what we're doing, they have to know we're recording. If there's any, I think I go through, if there's any VPN or security issues, many times they can't install software, so they can't screen share. Now, as you can see right here, I didn't have to install anything on this piece of software, so it's getting better, but that can be a very big limitation. I've had the seems too easy barrier at work where it doesn't come across as scholarly, or it just, is that it? Really? I could do that. Well, you can, but there's an art to making these questions. And when you get into it and the details and you start to pull people through, they start to realize it, but be prepared for that one. It's not the most advanced thing. We're doing usability testing here. We're not running psychological research, at a large scale. We're trying to test our designs. I mean, you always have technical difficulties, and I want to highlight not able to analyze body language. Now, I personally feel that the face is the most important part of this to analyze. Now, you'll see that probably because to overall research in the world, it's imperative. But we're doing usability testing traditionally on screens in this context, right? 80%, 90% of our work are going to be on screens. You can see the face. That's the most important part. You can see frustrations. You can see the eyes. You can kind of see, well, you can't hide your face after 15, 20 minutes in. If you've got the user talking and they're not comfortable, they're telling you a lot more than they're saying. Picture-in-picture and webcams too. A lot of places will have, a lot of software will have, you can't record or you can't, kind of the screen blacks out. So always test beforehand, make sure the software is good on their end and your end. Users don't feel as obligated to show. There's not as much accountability with I can just kind of dial in. So if users won't put it on their calendar, I'll get to how to address that facilitation later, kind of putting a reminder. And contextual inquiry is limited, they say. I don't know about that. You can get people in their environment if they're on their phone. Like maybe they're not walking down the street, but you can get pretty close. Like it's there. Bad data, yeah, users can walk away. I've had people walk away from tasks and it's like, oh, great, they spent 9 minutes on that task. I don't think so. Like that, you have to learn how to clean up data. And then at that point, we've lost time on task, but hopefully we can still get what was their success rate. Yeah, it's stuff like that. Maybe we can argue there's some memorability in there too. I'm going to go through some quick guidelines here. 15 to 30 minutes. Now, it's very common. I like to do an interview afterwards. So it's kind of, and there's two types of usability tests usually. Like Jared Spool also talks about this. There's like dedicated usability tests. You are doing your task. I can't say anything. You go do it. Done, done, done. We also do interview usability tasks, which is like, all right, this is your task. You can give limited help. It's more conversational. You're trying to learn how that user is using something. It might be a brand new interface that they have a lot of questions about. So you can kind of guide them and kind of push them a little bit. And then maybe follow it up with an interview. You're going to see in here probably 2 or 3 times. I have make a plan B, make a plan B. Having an interview is, one, it's great because you just get the why usually after. And 2 is if you can't manage to run your usability test, you have a backup. And that happens more often than you might think. Yeah, make sure your tasks are well defined. Don't ask them, tell them, put something in the cart. Save something, share this with a user. How do you? Don't ask that. Don't ask that. You have to prompt them. It's kind of like telling them what to do in an emergency situation. Tell someone it works. Also have them speak it out loud. Oh, I'm going to go here, something. I'm going to go here. It helps. It also distracts them and keeps them in a more comfortable environment. If you're using a screener survey, which means, usually you're sending out some type of demographic or you're like, who do we want, our personas, send them some requirements. Just even send them the tutorial. Just make sure you're going to be surprised. Might not know how to do that. Technical literacy could be a little low. Prepare your compensation too. That'll be asked about. You don't always have to compensate, but it's nice. $10, $20 Amazon gift card. Erica Hall has an amazing article about how to do low-cost usability testing for like $250, 200. I think I mentioned about the firewalls, the last setup time, and hardware sister and operating system. Make sure you specify what they need to be on. I have had this happen many times where they think because most users are on their phone often, 80% of their usage, they just use the phone. It's assumed. Their mental model is more around the phone. And I'd say allow for setup time, especially if you're on Windows. I'm a Windows user. I know their sound settings can be really odd. Macs are usually great. You don't have to worry about them too much. Windows, though, be careful with those machines. Here's some tools. Now, I'm not linking to anything. I don't want to send any referrals. I don't make money. So I'm just these are some tools that I like to use. Maze.design. You think I work for the team. I don't. It's amazing. It's affordable. I don't know any other surface that offers this type of information through just simple prototypes. It has won lots of discussions for me at Discovery. It is fantastic. It gives you, I said, heat maps, survey rankings, and integrates. It's affordable. I think it might be $50 a month. Now, I know this isn't dirt cheap, but what you're getting, the value is fantastic. And you can do it unmoderated. You can send it out. Figma's great. You can see mouse movement with multiplayer and everything. I haven't used it with InVision. Someone told me you can do this, so I took their word. Apparently, you can still track mouse movement, or you can track mouse movement with InVision. You could do a bunch of other stuff with these two tools. I'm just kind of going over what you'll receive at the end, right? You can do prototyping, A/B test. You could do all that on A/B split testing and stuff with these tools. Also, Figma is great. If you can't screen share, they could just click your avatar and you can tour them, or you can even watch them without even having any software interaction. So I've done it over the phone with users. Usability Hub is very nice. These will get you some tangible results. Remember, we want more information because we're probably sending this out to more people too. Unmoderated, yes, these can all be done in unmoderated ways. I mean, most of my work comes from probably these two at the top. We sometimes will go into optimal for card sorting and everything, and Usability Hub, but the price can get a little high after a while with that one. Some myths I think that when I read and people have come up and said, I believe this to be this way. You can't read body language. I went over this one. I believe your faces are most important part, especially in most of these. Now, of course, this is contextual, but you're getting what's important. There are studies that are done just on facial kind of reconstruction and frame by frame analysis. Users are more prone to distractions and interruptions, and that can invalidate results. Yes, it's true, for sure. It's common where we'll get extra users on calls, and they'll just pop in, and be like, or if we have especially if it's someone who's using a service and they have a manager or a supervisor. With teachers, which is where I work, a lot of the times you'll have a supervisor just, I'm just going to watch. First of all, your usability test is broken. We have a bias. It's not happening. So absolutely true, but I think it also provides some contextual context. Like the distractions are okay. You now have a little bit of that. It's not a perfect scenario. It's it's making do with what you have there, and that's why again those interview questions are always helpful because they will save you for any type of wackiness that happens, and it's going to look better, and you'll get data. The most important is getting data. Quality isn't as high. Sure, this is all good. You're getting density though. Hopefully you're getting this out to a lot more people. Hopefully you're just a higher amount and more types of it, and that's why we went through the initial click test, the 5-second test. We want to get layers and benchmarks. And can't develop sincere relationships. I've seen this one. Yeah, you do it faster in person. Every year I have to spend a week with teachers, and I make some of my best relationships through that. But I will also tell you that I have had fantastic relationships done just through the computer because I can talk to these users so much more often. The regularity of it is fantastic, and it really allows the discussion to continue. They become a persona, and they can kind of give us an evaluative. These are established users. Now we have a group of users who are now designated into a certain type, and now we have new users, so we can kind of test results better with that too, by keeping them. Yeah, and that's just about everything. I've got like 2 minutes left. I've timed this out pretty well. I went through a lot, and I have additional information as well. But I think, Diego, we could probably turn this over to some questions.
All right. So we have several questions. Thank you, everyone, for all of your questions. Okay, so I answered already, and a lot of you were asking them before. If we will be sending a recorded session or the slides. So yes, we will be sending out a following up email with a link to the recording, and they will also be posted to our YouTube channel. Regarding the slides, Joseph, I think they will be available.
Oh, absolutely, 100%. Yeah.
Yes. Okay, great. Yep. So we will be able to send the link out as well. And as I mentioned as well, there was another question regarding the Slack community. The Slack community is for our current UXA students, UX Academy students. And that is how we send that out via Slack. So now we'll go to the rest of the questions. So from Stephanie, how do you research and design for a diverse variety of users for the product?
I mean, part of what you're going to have to do is to break down that diversity. And that's where I think I saw some empathy mapping. How is it different than personas? You're going to have to draw some conclusions. So you're going to have to make some guesses. But what I've noticed, repeat repeat the question one more time so I don't go off on a tangent, which I have a habit of doing.
How do you research and design for a
Yep.
diverse variety of users for the product?
Right. And this is exactly what we do empathy mapping and personas for. The first thing you want to ask is, what problem are we solving? Why are we running a study? So we're talking about specific studies. Why would we run a study? Who do we want to test with? We have a whole bunch of people. Okay, so once we break those groups down, we might run the same study with different groups of people. So in education, we've got, it's a little bit easier and difficult. We've got roles: teachers, admins, specialists, students, vendors, and then you kind of figure out, well, in those subgroups, what are some commonalities? What are ways people use your product? And then you start to develop decision points. So some users do this, some users do that. That's a good split for a persona. Now you can apply them randomly. It doesn't have, you can just take what I have, and I wish I could show you. I can put it at the end. I can put some extra slides to show demonstrations of this. I just have a bunch of properties. I have like 5 slides of properties, like user does this, 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 and they're all grouped. It's like a character generator, and we're just pulling them over and putting them in. There's probably some things on one persona or one piece of audience that conflict with each other. This person's in a rush, and we're just trying to get like a conversation going and trying to target these people. So your job is to try to break it down and ask those questions as to what type of users are, how do we break down our demographics, and what enables your users' success in your product? Is there some type of functionality they usually desire that really, why do you use the website? Okay, we have a goal. Does the user use the website in the same stated way that we wanted the goal? And how do they use it? Oh, they can't get to the goal? Why? So we start to break things down in that manner. I hope that was good, but yeah, it's part of the challenge is breaking that universe of people down.
Thank you. So, which tool runs a heat map?
Maze.design. Yeah, that's the heat maps I showed early on. Boy, that is such a cool tool. Yeah, definitely check it out. I wish I did earn a commission on it because we've used it at Discovery now. We have a paid account.
Nice. When conducting research, can we use already existing quantitative and qualitative data and stats found online from a reliable source?
100% of the time. That's just secondary research. Most research, I'm so glad you asked this. Most research you do, like I said, is evaluative. You're just kind of doing a really glorified, I know someone's rolling in their grave, glorified design review. You're testing your design solution. What you're doing, that high level research, that's more enterprise. Amazon's doing like those big level kind of research tools. Yeah, I think I got that. What was it again? Like, one more time the question?
When conducting research, yes, sorry. When conducting research, can we use already existing quantitative and qualitative data and stats found online from a reliable source?
Check out Baymard, Baymard. They have a great blog where they do a lot of scholarly articles. Of course, Nielsen Norman, Pew Research, PEW Research, tons of data and analytics, and goodui.org. They do a lot of A/B testing, and Amazon's doing this now. Now Airbnb is doing this pattern, and they show like patterns in the real world. Like A/B testing is usually done by the big companies because it's expensive. Yeah, anyway, definitely 100% of the time, secondary research. They've done the work for you, use it.
Cool. How is the data or information recorded for under-moderated type?
You cut out, what was that?
How is the data or information recorded for unmoderated type?
And that, yeah, so it depends on the tool you use. So there's not many unmoderated tools you can use that actually will give you those heat maps. So in the instance of Optimal Workshop, you're running so we'll figure out what's the problem. All right, and we'll figure out what are our methods. If we need to figure out how a design works, you're only going to do that through a click test. If you need to figure out how your navigation is, if you're evaluating that, then you're going to run through a card sort, and a card sort's going to give you a big matrix of 95% of people put bananas in the fruit. 5% put them here. So it's like it's showing you your navigation. So it would really depend on the type of unmoderated testing that you're doing. And then that type is going to determine what the output would be.
Are feature flags unmoderated testing like A/B?
No, I mean, feature flags, the way we use feature flags, at least, they're just turn it on at a certain time for some. Okay, yes, I get it now. Yes, but you usually need to have it in an environment that's explicitly separate. So yeah, it's a feature flag that toggles something, but you need to make sure it's not like influencing else on the web page. And you also like, it's a separate instance. So it's a separate repository, it's a separate branch, it's a separate kind of way. And I understand it's not exactly how feature flags work. So yes and no, depending on the scope.
Cool. What are 5-second and first click testing?
You give them 5 seconds and you take it away from them when you ask them what they remember. Good for if you've introduced any type of new element, or if you need to see what users are recognizing first. First click test is usually, a lot of the times we'll have just go through the experience, speak out loud, kind of tell us what you think about it. What are your impressions? What are your questions? It's similar to that. Instead, we'll just have go through the website. What do you click on first? What's most appealing? Many times these personas, these users won't be normal users. We'll just check if you had a new user who went to the website who perhaps was on that. Like, you can't really give experienced users those types of things. You can.
Any insight on remote usability testing with a low-tech audience?
Yes. Well, everything I've done here, usually everything I do is usually low tech. In order to accommodate for kind of education, e-learning, public access tools, the biggest problem I've had is Figma starting to become a problem with some people. It's starting to chug on machines that are a little bit older. If you turn off the video, you don't need that. Or I had them hold the phone in front. If you have to, you can get around the kind of the bandwidth issues of if they can't install something and they can't have video, you can do it that way. That's kind of where Figma helps too. So if they do have low bandwidth, but for some reason Figma's still running really well, you could just have them call you up on the phone. And then they can run through Figma. And I say Figma, I mean InVision, anything where you can kind of mirror the experience. And this one, in my experience, Figma does this the best. You can click on their icon and just follow them that way. No bandwidth needed at that point, and it kind of preloads.
Can you recommend tools for remote testing? E.g., one that records the screen, but also the user's camera and audio.
That's someone said Loom. Loom is good. Zoom, any telecommunication software. The problem is Figma, especially once in a while, will go black screened. So you got to test it. Ring Central used to have a problem with sharing Figma's screen. It's a privacy thing. They actually run like a web browser, so there's some issues. So any telecom, that's why I didn't list a lot there. There's a ton I didn't list, because if I did, you could just go on. Whatever design lab, whatever you're using right here is cool. There's not many places that will allow you to share your screen without installing. And that's the big one, especially for education. Like, a lot of people won't be able to install it. They don't want to.
Next question. Can you go through the pros and cons of Maze?
Sure. Yeah. Let me go back and just, I can share my screen here just to give you an instance of what it's, yeah, right. Actually, is it all right if I go to my Maze account and show?
I don't see why not.
Okay, cool, great, yeah. Limited my content, and you can see, I'll show you some of what we do here. So they give you a top level, and I get to identify all my testers and stuff, so I can tag them, and I can see if I've got an internal user, I can get rid of their data, or I can get kind of track them. I will tell you one thing, 90% of the time, the first test stinks on this though. Always have a burner. I've run this like 15 times, and that first test, they don't know it. It's a very new experience. I could show you, can I show you the, no, I can't, test taking experience. But it goes into, yeah, there's that one I was talking about. That person stepped away. You get your misclicks and you get a bunch of data. And we test this with a bunch of people. You see some patterns. Again, first task always stinks. If you do, you go to a report. Now, I don't use their subjective measurements. This I don't care about this score. It doesn't matter anything to me. What I do care about is direct, indirect, and bounce. This is your success rate right here. If I want to see some details, it'll scroll me down. I get to see, again, first task, always a burner task. It stinks. Just something I found out when using this tool. But yeah, usability breakdown, mission success, what's time, average time spent. Now, you can't clean your data, so that's a disadvantage. I can't eliminate that person's 1,000 seconds. That's definitely stinks. I've talked to them about that. They have kind of looked into, they've told me they've looked into being able to kind of moderate your own data. And we can also go in. Now, if we want to see where they were hitting and where they were tapping, we have 2 different ways to navigate through these folders. This was excellent. I mean, our assumption was they were going to use the big blue one, right? Sure. But didn't know we'd get so much activity over here. This we can assume is an anomaly. And someone, we have some people just testing other targets as well. And I think you can get the clicks. Yes, you can actually get the click targets too. You can also see if you've got smaller targets. We do a lot of touch devices. So our targets have to be of a minimum size. So we can see if there's a potential error. So we've got something up here. I might put an assumption on our next test. Okay, I think this is going to test poorly for children or people with maybe cognitive issues. But yeah, it's fantastic for that stuff. You can download it as well. You can share this out to people, and then it continues down their path. But repeat of that, and it'll show you where your dropper. Yeah, where's your errors? What's the problem? It takes a while to learn. They call their missions and they call their tasks different things. So like their task is not explicitly what I call a task and what's traditionally seen as a task. So you got to learn their nomenclature system a bit. And there's, I love open-ended. I told you I'm a big interview fan. I love getting this stuff. Usually users that will give you a more verbose answer are people you might want to tag because this person cares. The people who go through and actually you get to kind of, again, build personas. And when I say personas, all they are little tiny representations of people at different times of the project. You don't need these wide open personas. They help, but you want to keep track of summarizations of users as you do this. Yeah, then I think you can have you put your test. You'll just import your prototype. You think you import it from Envision or Figma, and then if I do a preview here, which I can do, I think I busted this one up though. Does it still work? Yeah, Discover Education, get started. Yeah, that's me trying to build another one, and then it'll kind of give you a way. You can right click and you can abandon it, so the user can just get rid of it, or you can see I've got one target here, one target there, depending on where they go. Do they switch down here? And now it's just as if you were running through a prototype. And if they don't know what to do, you just have them right click and it's like, give up, never mind. All right. Next, I hope that was good enough. Check that out. It's pretty nice. They have a good free account too. I have another question.
Sweet. Yes. How many people do you test with for different projects and test types?
It's always funny if you look this one up because you go to like you go to good UI. I forget what it is. UX Matters or something. They're like in Erica Hall. You need to test with hundreds of people. Da, da, da. I will tell you, most times I run usability testing by the 5th or 7th person. I know Nielsen Norman says 5 to 7 people. I'm not saying it because of that. It's just, you should be close at that point. If you're usability testing, you've asked what the problem was. You've asked what we should be doing. Maybe you're doing your A/B or split testing. You've got maybe 2, 3 decisions, or you've got some variations in your design, right? You really should be on target at this point. So I usually aim for about 15, but I will tell you, it is extremely time intensive. So I aim for 30 to 45-minute sessions just because that extra 15 minutes times 10, you have to record that and you have to stop and make notes, and it's just a lot. It'll a lot more effort.
Ashley is asking, what is more useful, watching facial reactions or the screen as they go through the test?
Oh, the screen. I mean, that's okay. I say that with the fact that usually in the context, you want to know how the task is performing. Evaluation is not, that's why you're evaluating the design and not the user at that point that much. You don't care about that one user. You care about if the task is performing. So you definitely want that task. You want that mouse. You want to see if they're rubbernecking with the mouse or going left and right, or if you can, yeah, for sure you want that.
Can split testing be done in unmoderated test?
Yep. Split testing is essentially, I mean, this or that, this or that, this or that. I call it split testing. There's preference testing too. They call it preference testing. Then there was like multivariate testing where those are multivariate and A/B are a little bit more, I think, as I mentioned, larger in scope. So they're more in depth, usually in a development environment, because that's where you can kind of support that. It's hard to support two. I've done it in Maze where I've split it, but it just requires a lot more people in that regard. Yeah.
Can design be too data-driven? Some designers say too much reliance on data hurts more strategic thinking and prevents bigger leaps in experience improvements. Also, data cannot completely capture a user's experience.
Right. And that's why you do user research before that. I agree with you 100%. Data can stunt you. Data, you can just run a test and get completely different stuff. So that's why it's also important to recognize why. I'll tell you, if you're going to go in for an interview, act like data is more important. It is, yes. Whether you in practice or not, you use it. It is one of those things that will win you discussion. So that's why I said the 1 second test, the single click, the 5 second. If we can get quick data and we can get out there, pure user research people will tell you that's probably not great. I do functional user research for the most part. And yes, that'll generally solve your problems, I think. But yes, you're correct. Data is, people are not metrics.
David is asking, what would be the best way to not spend above your budget for giving gifts?
Is this like just a random question, or
Um,
for giving gifts? The compensation at the end. I'm so sorry. Okay, yeah.
Thank you for the question, David.
Right, I thought it was giving gifts. Okay, so a good way to do this is you send out a screener survey, and I'm going to get to the compensation, and you get a general population in, right? Okay, that's everybody, right? And maybe you say, for an Amazon card or something, right? Free gets everybody, but it gets you a lot of low quality. So what you do is you then have another screener survey. You don't have to, but it helps, especially if you're going to be giving away money. And it's another reason you only want like 7 to 15 people, right? We don't always have $1,000 to throw down here. So you offer $10 to $20, like maybe Amazon or Starbucks gift cards. And after you've broken down your audience a little bit, you hopefully like who's writing more in those open-ended questions, right? Those open-ended questions and the screener survey are really to give you a quality of user, not necessarily get the content out of it. So yeah, 10 to 20 I've seen works really well. For about 250 bucks, I think, is your 200, 250. Like, that's about right. That's pretty low cost if you're a company. Or I do it individually, 5, 6 people at $10 a piece, or a beer or something, coffee. You see guerrilla testing, buy people a coffee. You just handle it at the end, and just make sure you send it, because we've had that happen, and that's not good.
Emily asks, do you tend to ever use the same people you interviewed for usability testing, or does that really matter? Also, does it pay to do usability testing with advanced users if you're adding a feature to a platform, or would it be better to have a mix?
Really depends on what you're adding. I mean, if you're adding something that makes accessing your bank account statement a little bit easier, you're probably, depending on who it is, like, Bank of America or something, you might have lower to middle end users. If you're in like a Vanguard, you might have higher end users, and that's just classes. And now, if you're talking about technical literacy, that should probably have been like broken down already. You should kind of know what level you're at. So that, yeah, there was 2 parts to that question. What was the first part of that?
It was, do you tend to ever use the same people you interviewed for usability testing, or does that really matter?
Yeah, I mentioned it sometimes. It depends on if you want. There's always established users and new users. It all depends on the context. Sometimes out of those 10 users, you'll want 5 that aren't and 5 that are. That might not be a huge split. If you do, the memorability comes in. So if you have a user you're bringing back, like, is their speed pickup? Are they quicker? Can they remember it? Do they talk about it? We know when you have them do the test, like, oh yeah, this, right? If they say that they're going to recognize it at home. So yeah, absolutely, they're valuable. It's just what you're doing. Sometimes too, it's great due to the fact that it's so easy to contact people. You can kind of do an informal review, just do a quick design review. What do you think about this? Again, it's all time intensive, but it's a great way to establish relationships. Yeah, one more thing about that too. Same users could also be really good because they represent populations of people. So those users who want to come back are usually going to be your power users too.
What is the difference between an empathy map and a user persona?
You do empathy maps as part of personas. I'm not a huge fan of empathy maps. I do them a different way. Very confusing. Like, what do they hear? What my user's in a room. Like, they don't like so. uh, it's part of it. I can, if I wanted, I could show you. Just details. What does your average user? It's setting up environments. Some users do. Some users are busy. Some users are not busy. Some users have children. If you have, if you're talking about parents, maybe you have single parents. Are they on the go? We hear our typical ones. Are they busy? But when you really start to break it down, empathy mapping is to converse about your user. It's really a lot of these artifacts are to develop conversation around the user. So I make them, and many people don't even see these, but I have to bring them to meetings and get people talking about them. And now they know the user through osmosis. So a lot of these, like you see these articles, you have to do these. Yeah, they're really good, but they don't have to be as formal either. They're kind of getting the users. And if you've been working on a project for 4 or 5 years, you could probably fill these out super quickly.
Right. Mary Kim is asking, how do you synthesize Figma mouse movements into insights? Can you give us an example?
Yes, I wish I could show it. We had a sidebar test at one point. We were doing a video player page, and I had noticed the mouse was like, even when they were talking about it, they were flipping over. I could see the mouse going, right? That's like, I call it whiplash. You can only get it if you record the screen or if you physically observe it. And it is not great, right? It is not a great, but it's stuff like that. I noticed I had a few users that were going to the right, and I needed them in the middle of the screen. The goal of this web page was to intake the resource that they clicked on first, and then interact and engage with everything. So I knew right away that their mice were like investigate the page, right? And they go down, and a lot of users will use the mouse to go down. All right, you know kind of where they're going now. You don't need to do an eye test perhaps or eye tracking. None of these are perfect, but they're all kind of, again, pieces where we could say, well, we did see 3, 4 users kind of go over here, and that's like enough to validate some findings.
What objectives do we need to keep in mind before beginning a usability test?
There's always like 4 or 5 questions you ask. Why are we doing it? And it's when we say usability test, we should really be saying it's a study, right? It's part of the study. So when I say that, is the usability test could be the first 30 minutes, and then you've got an interview for 15 minutes behind that. And I could send out like sample scripts and stuff, but there's a pretty good one in the Design Lab curriculum. And it's so one is saying it's a study because that usability test could be a part of it. It could also be the entire test itself. So it's when you get into like pedantic little vocabulary like that, it kind of does matter. When would you keep doing this? What was it again? If you had to choose, what was the question again, Diego?
What, I'm sorry?
What
What
was the
objectives do we
question
need to
again?
keep in mind before beginning?
Right, thanks.
What
What are you trying
objectives
to,
do we need
after
to keep
that?
in mind?
Yeah, what are you trying to solve? Like, why are you running this test, right? Something happened. A lot of the times I'll use it to gracefully disagree with the group. So you think it should be that way, I think it should be this way. Let's go test it. I'll put it in a queue, and it'll go out like in that. Yeah, it's just kind of building up and making sure you test as it is needed. So what problem are you solving? What is the enablement to success too? So it's many times you'll see maybe the goal and the problem. They're kind of asking you to redefine it. What impedes the user? What does not impede the user? And what's really critical for success on this web page and what we're testing right now? And that'll decide on if it's navigation, you're going to go to a card sort. If it's testing, if they can complete a task. Usually, if you want to see if they can complete these key tasks, like if a user can complete this task, it's a success. We're good. So that's a usability test right there. If you've got some explicit thing they can complete.
When you're giving tasks for users to complete in your usability tests, do you try to give context as to why they're trying to complete this task, like a story?
Sometimes it's good. It depends on what you're asking them to do. If you're asking them to add an item to the cart, it doesn't need a story. If you're asking them to do something that you don't want to do a multi-step thing, but it's going to be multi-step, you know it's going to be, you might want to put them into a scenario. Why would they add this to their cart? Like, or why would they save this? Or, why would this user change, put a title here or something? It's just meaning like that.
Does Zoom work okay for usability testing? You would be able to record/share the screen.
Yeah, it's fine. My Ring Central, Zoom, they all work super fine. I haven't come across one in the last few years that has given me any real issues besides the black screens.
Janet is asking, how much statistical analysis do you perform on data before presenting? Are UX designers expected to run this analysis?
I work with a data team. We use a tool called Pendo, which can retroactively grab data. So like if we don't record it, I can kind of go grab it now. I'm not a data specialist. How much do I use? A bit. It's a good way to identify things. I know recently we were looking at, I redesigned the player page. So 6 months after, we wanted to see how it was performing. I wanted to know, my goal when I redesigned this page was, are users sharing it more? Are they saving it more? So we had some engagement metrics, and we went back. I went to Pendo, and we saw actually it was cool because of the coronavirus. We had a reverse spring break. So usually we see a dip. We saw an increase. I could tell if the sharing was going up, so I can tell if the decisions that I made were good or bad. So maybe prior and after are data heavy, and then in the middle is when you kind of are narrowing down your solution, and then you'll test the effectiveness afterwards.
Anastasia is asking, and no worries if it was already mentioned before. She's asking, if I'm working on a personal project and don't have a big budget for testing, which platforms or services would you suggest where I can find users willing to test out my prototypes at a reasonable price?
Yeah, recruitment. So I wouldn't use a recruiter first off. I'd go to, you're probably doing research like, I don't know, we're doing a kayaking website. I'm probably going to go into some wilderness forums or something, or uh, I'm going to go to where the users are and then ask them directly. Sure, you can use recruiting. Recruiting's good if you need 40, 50, high amounts of people, but I really think you could save yourself some money by, I know you can. You can save yourself tons of money because I do it, by going in and just really genuinely, you can also look at forums and see who's more active and kind of control your user population. And I say forums because generally you're just going to go, if there's a book club or if there's a club, physically somewhere, go to where the users are.
Can you go into more detail about slips and mistakes as errors? Do you have examples? Often I get confused about errors against limitations of the prototype.
Yeah, this is why I do interview-based prototypes too, because many times if the content is not there, the user will get mixed up, just even though it's kind of usable. So you also have the not integrity, but the quality of the prototype, how far it is, the fidelity of it. Errors meaning it depends. So sometimes we have direct success and indirect success. So we know they got to the end, but they didn't go directly. Errors are if they clicked anywhere once without it being the end all, right? If there's any type of interaction between that and the task, that's an error. If it's just a misclick, it's an error. It's just a small one though. If they can't complete the task, or they have to ask you, and you really do have to break and speak to the user, you're not supposed to speak to them for the most part. You're supposed to just politely deflect. That's it's called a critical failure or severe, and then you have to estimate, is it for this one user? So you always want to measure the occurrences of errors. One user is nothing, two users not much, 3, 4 users, especially in a usability test, like we know we're getting to an issue here probably. We might want to address this. And you want to make your errors actionable. So if you get an error, is it a bug? Is it a usability error? Is it a error that should not change. It is working as intended, but the expectation of the user is different. Then you might want to work with the marketing or professional development teams. So you might want to mark that as like friction point. Still works well, meets expectations. Users aren't, so there you have to work with that team. If you're still seeing bad feedback, then you want to change it. It's kind of slowly making sure that we're doing this over time with the users.
Next question. What are the most commonly used usability tests?
Well, the usability test in itself is the type. I think I'll send the list back out. We would say evaluative methods. Definitely evaluative. I think Erica Hall says causal as well. I think some people say, well, are they causal studies? But we're just measuring. I wrote it down. We're measuring. Does it work? Are we getting close? What and how is it like? Is it working? So card sorting, I think, falls, and you're going to hear, you probably read maybe the card sorting falls into it because you're evaluating the navigation. I said tree testing, I think, 5-second test, usability to hub, I think, or usability testing.com has a few that are built in as well. It's just, yeah, that's it. Usability testing is its own thing.
Christelle is asking, do they ask about usability testing in job interviews?
Yes.
Can we reuse participants from a user interview for usability testing?
Oh yeah, I usually do them in the same session for sure. You get the why out of it. Why did you choose that? Why is this like that? Why? Yeah. Oh, it depends on your position, but this is for a different discussion. But I will tell you recently too, they ask for more than you might like. Then they lead on.
Is Sketch Mirror good for testing of a mobile prototype on a phone? I notice it is only proportioned. I notice it is only proportioned well if I run it on my own Mirror app account, but not in browser link for users.
I'll be honest, I haven't used Sketch Mirror just because I've switched over to Figma. But I know I probably just have to make a separate artboard for it with that size if I'm understanding the question correctly. But yes, I do. I had someone who was a big Sketch user and doesn't like Figma argue with me about this, so I assume you can do it with Sketch. Yes, they advocated for it. I just don't know.
Kate is asking, if you're presenting secondary research, what do you feel is too old in terms of the date of the study? As an example, a study done in 2015, is that too old?
It's a great question too. No, 2015 for sure, no. And it all depends too. So there's basic principles of just usability testing that 1974 still apply. 2015, it would depend on the context of the pattern too. If the pattern is explicitly something that isn't really in play anymore, it could also be an opportunity. It really all depends on context. It really on how 2015 is fine. I think 2010 even nothing's happening that drastically. Human beings are still human beings. I wouldn't say there's anything. I mean, you're going past 20 years. If anything really specific, the higher the level, the better, the more accurate, and the better it probably holds up.
Janet is asking, what percentage of your time do you spend ideating / prototyping versus testing / research?
Well, I'm in a certain situation where I am not a researcher. I just happen to fall into it because I have to compensate for it. And it depends on if you could be the designer and you could be requesting the research too, right? You don't have to do it yourself, or you could be like, hi, I need this tested or something. So during a project, and it's weird too, because as you test, you're moving on to design something. So you're never just truly waiting. I mean, my time, it's probably spent, and it depends when I'm in the project, like at what part we're doing, probably 70-30, 70% design and prototypes and 30% research, probably, I would say. Right now, when we're planning on launching and we're going to evaluate, I've got like 50-50 because I don't really need to do much design work. I'm really just refining because we don't want to change much.
Ashley's asking, for your intro burner test, are you testing with actual users or test users? If you're testing actual users and it's a burner, do you find new testers?
No, that was the only reason. It was just for maze.design. Like that experience, that whatever first task is, it's like asking the color of their shirt. It's like they by the time they figure it out, can I right click? I've watched it happen. I've done contextual inquiry with this. even users who have used it once, I still get the same error. So that it was only specifically for Maze. Now, when you go into a usability test or an interview, you want to ask them, what's your typical day look like? You can get good user from that. Like, what do you do from the start of your day to the end of your day? It may not seem relevant, but you're going to see, oh, you do, you're going to get them speaking too, and they're going to start telling you more. So it's kind of getting that boulder moving. So in a regular test, I would say burner, I would say comfort questions. In my script, I always have like 2 or 3 comfort questions at the top.
How is the data or information recorded for unmoderated type?
That's great. It's a great one. Can I show, if I can, let me see if I have a crate. I'm going to show a screen really quickly here because I'm in the process of about to launch one, and I will show you kind of how we do it. So in this instance, we're doing a mix, an interview and a usability test. These are just our open-ended questions, and so you always want to account for extra stuff that will just be kind of tangential. It might relate or it might not, and you can see here, find an asset, find a video, find. These are prompts. Now, some of these are where would you go, because see, that's got a special case here, and we try to always put a parentheses after it, because this should associate with a goal. You can't just have everyone asking questions like these. All these tasks need to support wayfinding, and all these tasks need to support curriculum. So we'll do this, and every user gets their own document. So we'll have like 10 or 12 of these documents kind of going down, filling out. And then you saw those big charts I had. You put all these things into those charts and really just say, all right, this occurred 5 times, this occurred 6 times, this occurred 7 times. And you kind of do and the occurrences of like quotes. You want to pull out quotes that are like very emotive. That's what you want to pull out on here too, not just regular quotes. They have to like pertain to something. And these are kind of demographic intro questions. It's from that into probably a spreadsheet, and then I use Airtable to record all the research I do in a centralized data repository.
If you had to choose 2 research methods to use in the design of an e-commerce for physical products, which 2 would you pick?
I'm always going to go to usability tests and interviews. I mean, but it would depend on like what you're doing with e-commerce website. Do we have a page that we need to improve on? I want to make sure, like as a sample, what are the goals of this web page? Okay, what and they might, you're going to get things like they need to know the story of us better. That's not a goal. I can't measure it, right? There's qualitative goals and there's quantitative goals, and that's okay, and that's fine. But we can't test against that. We have to deduce that. So we want to make sure that we're getting. I lost my train of thought again. I hope that answered it.
If you had to choose 2 research methods to use in the design commerce of which 2 would you pick?
Most likely you're going to be doing surveys, usability testing, and interviews for the most part. E-commerce, though, you probably want to do a cart sort to make sure your navigation, you're probably going to have some type of large taxonomy of that site. So I'm assuming you're going to want to know where things are grouped and where they would expect them.
What do you do with user feedback telling you to add features or make specific changes?
Record it and document how many times it comes up. If you look at it and it's something that should go in, so I'll get feedback and I'll put a ticket. Like a ticket is just a task, and I'll put it as a placeholder. Like maybe that's step 2. If it has to occur a certain amount of times, it either needs to be valuable, objectively valuable from the outset, or it needs to be the frequency needs to occur enough in either an individual, so it has to happen to an individual a lot, or it has to happen to a lot of people. So when you send those bug reports to Microsoft, they're getting like 1, 2, 3, 4. When this hits 1,000, mark it as like to be done. So it's more of that. You're going to record it over time, and then after it adds up, and this becomes a problem. And I use Airtable for that. So I have instances where like this has occurred 12 times, 13 times. Let's put this. I have to flag it now, or like I have to put it in.
Next question. Are there any common mistakes that new designers make when creating a usability testing that may lead to bias in the data?
Yeah, bad tasking questions. Constantly bad task. When you're asking interview questions too, don't ever ask them a closed question, which is, can you do, if you can answer it with yes or no, you have to change it. Or you have to follow up. So that's, and I say that because that's part of the interview part. It's the usability test you want to, what are some of the other common mistakes? Is, can you do this? And it's too ambiguous. Some of our, I'm trying to think of some example tasks. So the one is here, find a resource that shows how to make it, find a class. That's its big thing is basically bad tasks or not grouping the tasks for goals. So you just have a bunch of arbitrary tasks because there's also a flow. You have a user do something, you've got to reset them, right? You can't just, you don't want to put them back on the same web page and have them, because you're loading them up. If they see things on the web page, the more you keep them there, the faster it's going to get. I've had like a list test, and that stinks because you got to bring them into the list, take them out and distract them, bring them back to the page. So there's like a flow to it as well. Like physically on the web page, if all of your elements and tasks are really close, that's going to load them up and introduce a bias where they're going to perform. I'm willing to bet, my assumption would be each task gets a little bit better. Any other mistakes? No, I don't think so. Oh, don't do your sessions back to back. Do not do that. Put 10 to 15 minutes in between them. One, you should have a really quick session. What are our quick findings? 4 or 5 quick findings. 2 is people are people. I still do this by accident sometimes. Just always give yourself 15 minutes in between. If someone shows up late, you want that data. Shift their meeting a little bit, right? So you don't want to spend 30 minutes there and have to cut the session short. That stinks.
How do you deal with incomplete prototypes? The ones I created so far have limited functionality and many buttons that won't do anything if users click on them. Is it even worth testing with them?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. You don't need that. You'll do a prototype UI, which is what I call it, which is a UI that's stuck in between being a wireframe and, something that's finished. If that's fine, they can click on those buttons. That means your task is bad. It means your task failed. And like something like Maze would be able to give you that heat map. But even if you were just watching them use it, if you tell them to do a task, like an e-commerce or something, and you want them to run it, an action or something, and those other buttons are great because that indicates the real interface. If they go down that, the minute they hit that, it doesn't matter if that button works. They're gone. They're off that task. It's like done. Unless there's an indirect way for them to get back. Yeah, for sure, test like that. That's kind of when you should test early and often.
When you run a usability test, do you essentially design the pages on the main user task flow, or do you do extra design to cover the random clicking people usually do?
Only the task. You don't want them once they go off of it, and you do those critical tasks. That's why you might only have a 3-task usability test. That's okay. You only want to test. There's only 3 goals to a web page, right? Sometimes many times I like to grab team assumptions and, like I said, gracefully disagree. So our task, and that's why I like to pair it with an interview, because I usually like to get a little bit more out of it. I find it's enjoyable too. The users, 30 minutes isn't too much. So yeah, that's, yeah, I'm trying to think about, I keep forgetting on my train of thought here. Is there a way I can look at the question you're asking on the side? Are you marking them done? Oh, there we go. Incomplete types. All right. Do you random? Okay, that's it. All right. What's the next one?
So the next one is, what tips do you have for a new designer redesigning, restructuring a client's website on a short timeline? What steps, tests are absolutely necessary and likely to be the most informative?
That's a great question. Yeah, well, since you're redesigning it, you definitely want to know how that one performs. So I would do a usability test and see how their critical success tasks are, 4 or 5 of those, and then ask them, how do they use it? How do they? What are some problems? What are some frustrations? What are some things that help them enable their tasks? What are some things they wish that could be better? And then I think it was, if you want to know where everything is and stuff, you probably definitely do that card sort again. Those 3 tests are probably, those 3 study types are probably going to get you most of your information. if you go on like Nielsen Norman and do like UX cheat sheet, they'll show you a lot of these just come down to, there's 1,000 different methods. A lot of them just come down to usability and asking in interviews and kind of taking different artifacts out of that.
And our last question, but not, oh, wait, no, we got one more after this one. What to do if a user suggests design solutions? Ignore it.
They can suggest it. You can put it in the box. It's feedback. So if it's not like, you have types of feedback, you'll have feature request. That's feature request. Okay, I get you on it. The problem is when a power user hits someone and your stakeholders, and that stakeholder wants to make someone happy. That's when you kind of have to say, hi, wait, I have to ask, why are we doing this and where is it coming from? Do you have, who's asking for this? Oh, I had a user. I will tell you something. Amazon has a great rule about writing where in using words like we have a few or a lot, they're bad words because they generalize too much. So that's great. Assess it. Is it good? Okay, then mark it down. It might be really good. Take it. But it's one user. I would never make a change based on one user.
And our last question. In your experience, are designs that have more than one path for the same task better or just complicated?
I doesn't, in the instance I showed before where I had an indirect success, they were it was more of a preference. Do they choose to use the visual card or do they choose to use, I think we had a left bar over there. That one wasn't, wasn't better. You definitely have a primary. You should always have a primary, right? If they use that, you want to know why though. Like it might be better, it might not be better, but you want to know why they would use that. Is it because it's more visually interesting? Is it because the label makes more sense? Is it some other reason? Like that's where a follow-up question of not asking the satisfaction, but like what was the reason? And if they're speaking it out loud, hopefully they're telling you, okay, well I see this, I'm going there. So that's another thing you're and well, that's moderated, of course. You could do that with unmoderated.
Do stakeholders pay more attention? I'm sorry, Amy thought that was the last one, but
oh, that's fine. I'll go forever.
thank you. Do stakeholders pay more attention to power users? This pertains especially to the capstone I'm working on right now. Okay.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. We have what we call cheerleaders users. I'm generalizing. Okay. I will say when you get in front of users, as many stakeholders and stuff do, they get in front of they like focus groups. It feels really good to make people smile, and it feels really good to make promises, and it feels really good. And they go back to these users and they return, and there's a relationship there. Yeah, it happens for sure. And you have to, part of my job is balancing okay, they do represent an important user. They do, but they're also your user who's probably going to give you the most biased feedback. They're probably on your side. They're probably not angry with you. If they are angry, they're probably overall pretty happy because they're still here. And but the thing about those is that many times those are the purchasers and those are the influencers. So you do have to take that stuff into account. You just want to make sure that as this is where that user-centered drive design comes in. For a while I was like, that's common sense, right? It's really not. It's really not when you really start to speak to the stakeholders. You do have to take into account. This is where product designer versus graphic designer versus having the knowledge to counter and using all this data we just talked about. Hopefully you can have a lot. The discussions are more graceful and more scholarly kind of when you speak about them, so that you don't have to do these anecdotal I thinks. It's just that's not most of our users. Yeah, but at the same time, you do have to respect that those are purchasing for those users. There's a good comic I can try. There's a good comic on Twitter where they have a mobile for a child and the parents are like, this is great, and the kids just stare it up and it's the butts. It's you have to know who's going to use the actual product, not who manages those people.
Joseph, do you have favorite resources that you would recommend, books or sites that have helped you level up?
Yes, Erica Hall's Not Enough Research, second edition. It's just one of those books that I keep to my side when I can't articulate something, or I'm I know that's not right, but I can't get the words. I just go to that book. It's 10, 11 $5 or something. And Erica Hall she is great with, she is extremely intelligent, but she speaks on a level that is like very regular, and she is actually the one that wrote the article on how to do like low cost usability and testing and stuff. And I've actually modeled myself a lot after her, and I have like my own personal mentor that yeah, that's a big one. I think I mentioned Baymard is great. Oh, fantastic for their blog articles with the depth that they go into. And I mean, there's always Nielsen Norman, but you really want to try to separate yourself because a lot of people are going to be Jared Spool. Anything that Jared Spool writes is always going to be pretty good. Just I just one recommendation: when you read Medium and you read these things, just click on the author and make sure that author knows what they're writing about. That's a big thing too.
Yes.
Yeah, right.
And that was it for today. That was it for today. It wasn't exactly an hour and 20 minutes. So thank you so much, Joseph, for your time. Thank you so much to everyone that joined us. No question, no other questions. Like I mentioned, we will make a recording of this available on the YouTube page. For those of you that are currently in UX Academy, there will be a link sent out via Slack as well. And if I'm not mistaken, there will also be a blog post on our blog that will have a link to the slides and to the video. So thank you again, everyone, for joining. I hope everyone is staying as safe as possible. Thank you, Joseph, for joining us and for doing this. It is awesome.
I mean, thank you, and thank everyone here for spending an hour and 20 minutes with me and letting me talk. So if I don't know if it's okay, but anybody can feel free to contact me through email. You can send out my contact information. I'd be happy to answer any other questions. Thanks, everyone.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Bye now. Stay safe.
Bye.